or tactical team.
Hey there guys, this is me, Malorian, and this is going to be an Orc Tactical Team. Now first of all, I want to wish you guys all a Merry Christmas. Hopefully you guys are going to get some, great hobby stuff and maybe some models or some money to go towards models. But what we're going to be talking about today is Jacks versus Beasts. On the Mr. Malorian Facebook page, we were having a kind of a conversation today talking about the Hellmouth, how broken it is, and how apparently it needs to be so that you can protect these overpriced Legion Heavies, and really gone through this conversation talking about Warjacks versus Beasts, and which one is better, and do you need to make up for it, blah 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 blah. So I thought we'd take this time now to kind of talk about this. Now, I guess the best place to start this from is to talk about Mark II. Now, the problem with Mark II was that Beasts, straight up, were just better than Jacks. That's why whenever you saw a list being made, the War Machine list would pretty much just be taking like one Jack, whatever they had to take, and then that's it. And on the War Beast side, or on the Horde side rather, they'd be taking lots of Beasts because they did lots of amazing things, plus you needed them to generate Fury for your caster. So you normally saw these really tough beasts coming in, smashing the Jacks, and eventually you just kind of like give up on the Jacks, and if you don't have good control, just try and do it more with the infantry and stuff like that. And that's where they really kind of saw like, geez, this isn't really working very well, and we have to change the Jacks. The real change between the two, Mark II and Mark III, was that the Jacks all of a sudden started getting the +1 free focus for the power-up, and then for the Beast, they usually toned them down a little bit as well. So hoping that when you were like this in Mark II, that you end up like this in Mark III. Now, depending on who you talk to, both sides right now are completely thinking the other side is better. If you talk to a War Machine side, they'll tell you those beasts, this is crazy, they still can make so many attacks, they destroy us so easily, they can just be healed all the time, it's stupid. And then on the other side, for the War Machine, or on the Horde side, they're saying the War Machine things like, oh, now you get the free focus, and you're so cheap, and So it's weird, they kind of have both sides claiming that the other one is overly powerful. So again, that's why I thought this would be a really good topic. Now, I think the first spot where we want to kind of just compare these is what's the benefits from either side. Now, if you're going with a Warjack, and again, many of the things I want to kind of preface with me saying this again is that I do know both sides of these. You see me now where I'm doing Signar and Mercs all the time, but I got into the game playing 1.5 years of Legion. I played Circle, I played Minions, and of course I played lots of War Machine stuff, so I don't need to kind of show that side, but I kind of feel like I know both sides of this coin, so hopefully I can portray this correctly. Now, on the War Machine side, the advantage that we're having right now as being a War Machine thing is that, first of all, we can go and get the free focus. Just right up, we are more efficient in that way because, hey, I just get a free focus. I can actually run a whole bunch of guys, a whole bunch of Jacks, because, hey, if I want them all to run, if I want them all to do something, they all get a free focus. And that's why you see things like, spam for lots of hunters and stuff like that because they're so efficient with that one focus. Another thing too we can see an advantage for the Jacks is that usually the stats is a little bit higher, both in your base stats and in your number of boxes. So maybe it's a thing where a War Beast might be 30, well for a Warjack it might be 32, 34, who knows, it really depends on the situation, right? The defense is usually a tad higher, and again we're talking about generalities here, but the armor is a little bit higher too, and so those advantages kind of go across that way. As well, you kind of get a little bit more hitting power from the Warjack side. Usually the strength is a little bit higher too, and so you have a little bit more punch, and so there's that going forward as well. As well, you can be having these mechanics. You can buy these mechanics and they can go out and they can fix all these different things. And so that's a good way to kind of go and keep your stuff up, keep your stuff running. And that's really where the Warjack side is doing well. Plus, they have some really cheap ones. You don't really see that so much on the Horde side. And I think that really is because of how things went from Mark II. As we said in Mark II, nobody really liked taking Jacks. You would take the cheapest you can, and that's it. So when you're sitting from War Machine's side, or not War Machine's side, from Privateer Press's side, and you want to release a Jack that you think people want and people want to use, well, you can try and make some of these more powerful things, but if you make a cheaper jack, well, that's what people want. They want to take that one cheap jack, let's go. And so I think that whole area was just developed more on the War Machine side because the demand was there. So that's really the Warjack side, is that you're a little bit stronger, you get a free focus, and also you have those cheaper versions. Well, let's kind of look then on the Horde side. What is it better to be on the Hordes? Well, first of all, you have the Fury system. And what the Fury system does is you get to go in there and just buy. Now, sure, a Warjack can get its focus, and it can charge out and do some damage far away from the Warcaster, but a Warlock, as long as you can keep in range, you can keep on forcing it to buy attacks until you max out that Fury. And so, whereas on the War Machine side, you're kind of limited for your output because you can only go out there and make some attacks, and then it's like, well, I can only allocate so much focus. Well, when you come over to the Horde side, well, now it's like, if I really need to, if this is my big go time, this is my big, I'm going to get my alpha, I'm going to attack, go all out, right? I can get so many attacks out of this thing. So whereas, let's say a Stormclad with his nice big sword will go in there, well, I can attack once for free, and then if I have 3 focus, I can attack 3 more times. That's awesome. Well, on the Horde side, you're going to have, let's say, 4 Fury, so you're getting 1 more attack that way, plus it's a lot more common to be having multiple attacks. So it's not as common like in War Machine to have like my 1 sword. On the other side, it's like, hey, I got both my talons, like a Scythian. Or you're something that has lots of attacks. I got a bite and I got 2 claws. And so the damage output for these things are a lot higher. As well, even though your stats are a little bit lower, you're able to heal these guys up without needing any other investment. Now, we talked about how there are mechanics on the War Machine side. Well, you have to kind of factor that into the points, plus mechanics can die kind of easily. On the Horde side, if you have a beast that's hurt all the way down to like 1 box, hey, whatever. I heal those 2 other spirals, and he is good to go. Just, there you go, it's on my turn. I didn't need anything else to happen. I just go first with my Warlock, heal up those 2 spirals, and it's like that thing is 100% and ready to tear something apart. Whereas, compared to the War Machine side, if you go in there and you attack it, and you do a bunch of damage, well, if you're down to 1 box, things are kind of really, really sad. I mean, if you lose your Cortex, you can't be even allocate any focus. If you lose your sword, it's like, well, sucks to be me. If you got a hunter that has its gun destroyed and you can't get a mechanic to it, it's not really doing anything from then on till it gets fixed. So there's a lot more of mitigation on that Horde side. Now, there is the point, though, that even though you can get a lot of that output and you can be healing and all that stuff, there is still a fact that you still have to balance your Fury. If you're wanting to be running beasts and all this stuff, I mean, you have to be making sure that if you're running hot, which means that you're using more Fury that you can pull back in, you're probably going to have a couple of them going crazy. Now, that can be good, that can be, I'm not going to say, well, of course it can be kind of bad, but I guess what I'm trying to say here is that sometimes you don't really care, because if you send in a beast and it kills the enemy heavy, you're already up on the peace trade. If it just does 1 big attack next time, no big deal. If you're kind of going and you go a little bit over without really doing very much, and then a beast frenzies, that can all of a sudden swing the peace trade against you. So you have to be a little bit careful, but there's a few other pieces out there that helps you mitigate Fury. And I think that's why, really, there's almost like a cap to how many beasts a Warlock can take. If you have a Warlock that has, let's say, 8 Heavies, and you want to go and you go up the road, it doesn't have to be Heavies, it's 8 beasts. Well, that really means that unless you're Fury 8, they can't all run up on the first turn. That's just a simple thing. Really, whatever your Fury stat is, and your ability to negate Fury, that's how many beasts you can really run effectively by yourself as a Warlock. If I'm Fury 6, I can only really take 6 beasts, so let's go up and I'm going to take my 6 beasts. And I think because of that, remember again, we said on the War Machine side that there was kind of more of this market for this cheaper jack because that's what people wanted. I want 1 jack and I want to be cheap. On the Horde side, it's like, well, I want to have my jacks, and I need them to be strong. If I'm going to go in there, and I'm going to get the alpha, and I'm going to tear things apart, well, I need that to be as effective as possible. I don't want to have the cheapest of the cheap. I can't go past my Fury stat really anyway. So this collection of beasts I have, I want to be a little bit better so that they can be doing more damage and doing a better alpha, so that by the time they go on Frenzy or whatever, hey, I've done so much damage, it doesn't matter. And so that's why the market on the Horde side isn't really so much of looking for those cheap jacks, other than trying to find something cheap and small that might have a neat, interesting spell, because that is another advantage of the Horde side and the Beast, is that, hey, all these things kind of give you another spell. But the market more is there, is that you want an effective beast that can be doing a lot of damage. So at this point here, where we're kind of looking at this, you can kind of see where when you're holding these two piles, the two sides are kind of like going, well, look what you got, look what you got, look what you got. Because on this War Machine side, we're now seeing that, okay, well, look at all these Hordes guys. They got, you know, these better beasts, rather, these better heavies that can alpha us and do more damage and take us out, and they can heal them up, and you're getting spells and all this stuff. This is crazy. And on the Horde side, they're looking at the War Machine and saying, you're all cheap and you're so effective because you're getting one free focus. Well, the thing to remember about Mark III is that you can't just compare apples to apples. And I think the real reason for that is because this is no longer a game of running just one jack anymore. This is now going, and now all of a sudden you have a lot more jack points, you have a lot more beast points, and those battle groups are going to be a lot larger. So instead of trying to think of it as this one jack versus one beast, you have to think of it as this team of jacks versus this team of beasts, and that's completely different. For the one side, for the Horde side, we already talked about where you can only expand so far, because once you get to that max, I can't run you all. I literally can't unless I take other support models, because if I run 7 beasts and I only have 6 fury, one of them is going to be testing next turn, and that's just not good. So I want to take these, I want to make them a little bit stronger, and I want to make sure that when I go in there and I do my alpha, that they're strong enough that I can tear apart the opponent and do the damage I need to get ahead. If I go in and I don't totally destroy it, that's going to be bad. In fact, I want to be setting in my beast, pretty much destroying one jack and probably doing damage to another jack as well, right? If I can destroy one jack and have enough punch to like take off the weapon or the cortex of another, hey, now we're looking really good. So that's kind of like where they're pushing. On the War Machine side, let's look at the heavies first, because this is now where it makes a big difference whether we're talking about heavies or lights. If we're talking about heavies, you can't really expand that the same way. If you have one jack, sure, it's awesome. I get my one free one. I can go and I can give it a couple extra focus, and it can go off there and do its great, effective, efficient thing. However, once I start running more jacks, and let's try and say the same thing like 6, well, okay, I can give them each their free focus. That's awesome. Let's assume again that I'm focus 6. I can give them each one more. Okay, this is now not looking really good, because whereas before when we said 1 versus 1, and on the War Machine side we said that Stormclad could be making 1 attack and buying 3 mores, and so that's a total of 4 attacks, and then the Scythian is making 2 attacks, buying 4 more for 6 attacks, plus it has a little bite, so we'll call it a little bit like 6.5, 7. That's not a good ratio. When you expand that now, where we're saying the 6 beasts versus the 6 jacks, well, now they're only having the 2 focus each for the Warjacks, so they're getting 3 attacks each, so the 3 times 6 is 18 attacks, and if we're going then on to the Scythians, let's say there's now 6 Scythians, and we'll ignore that little claw thing, well, 6 times 6 is 36. That is such a huge swing now. And at the same time, it's not even just the 36 attacks from the Beast going against the 16 of the Jacks. Well, it's also the fact that Warlock still has all the fury on itself to be casting spells and helping in that way too. When you start expanding on the War Machine side and saying, hey, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to go and try and load these guys up. Oh my god, I have upkeeps to do. I really need to do this spell. You really can't empower your Warjacks to do what you're supposed to do. So when I'm looking at this, where we're talking about Mark III large battle groups, when it comes to heavies, it's straight up the beasts are better. I'm trying to remember which side that I'm reaching is going to be which side. That the Horde heavies are just better. It's just the way it is. That system, they're going to win out. Now, the reason why I broke this up is because when it comes to lights, it's a completely different story. If you're going to the Horde side and you're running a whole bunch of different lights, well, first of all, you're going to run into a lot of problem because let's assume you're running, you know, I don't know, 10 lights and they're all going to do something that they need to boost once. Well, you better hope you got a really high, you know, fury management system because odds are they're not going to be going really well. They're going to be frenzying and it's going to be really, really bad. Meanwhile, on the War Machine side, let's get this right, you can take a whole bunch of these lights and they are loving the hell out of that free focus that they're getting. I can be taking a bajillion hunters or whatever and they're loving life. Just, hey, I can probably raw dog the shot because I'm, you know, rat 7. I can aim up to rat 9 and then I'll boost the damage. And it makes no negative effect on my caster whatsoever. My caster's still there with all the focus, able to cast spells. You know, if I want to throw a little bit more out to those lights, sure, why not? Let's say there's some chargers there. So they got the one free one to do the one double boosted shot, and then I'll give you another one for a second double boosted one. But even then, they don't need it. They're getting the one free one for the one double boosted, and that's probably awesome anyway. So when you look at that side, the lights for a War Machine are way better, and they're going to win this. And I think that's why you see this animosity right now, where both sides aren't really understanding the other, where, you know, you got the Warjack people, the War Machine, I'm going to get this right, the War Machine side saying, man, look at this, your heavy still just out produce us, just smash us. And then you got the Horde side saying, well, no, look at all those hunters, they're tearing us apart and we're so expensive, this isn't fair. So I think that's where it comes in, and when it comes down to is it Jacks versus Beasts, well, when it comes to heavies, Hordes wins, and when it comes to lights, War Machine wins. But there's one more question that goes along with this. Is there a point disparity even with this? Like, sure, this is going on like that, but there's still a point and a problem in points. Well, one of the things I tried doing today, this is like an interest type thing, is I did posts making up these fake Jack and this fake Beast, and unfortunately it was hard to do this. One of them was called the Rhinothean, which was really just taking the Ironclad stats and making it like a beast and saying like, hey, this is what it is for a beast. It's going to be now speed 5, armor or defense 12, armor 18. It's going to have these 1-inch weapons. You can only have fury 3, and you can only be healed by your shepherd. That's the hard thing, is trying to get that part in there too. And when I asked people what they thought about this new potential Legion Beast and how many points they'd pay for it, well, first of all, you had a lot of Legion people. They're like, I don't think I'd want this. It's so slow. It doesn't have reach. It has a low fury. You know, I would pay somewhere between 12 to 14 points type thing. And I think that's the right answer. You know, when I look at some of these lights, like the super basic ones on the War Machine side, I do feel that some of them, say like the Juggernaut or even my Ironclad or definitely the Crusader, are a point too cheap or even two. So, you know, there is that, probably just like a point cheaper, but still, that's in that same type of range. And of course, people started catching on, and then they realized, oh, I see what you're doing here, Malorian. And on the other side, I also had the, what do I call it, the Stormadon, which was basically this new Signar Jack that was really the Scythian. So it had like the extra rules to try and make this work, where you can actually allocate it for focus, and you can actually heal it with your Warcaster using focus. And again, it's hard to get these ideas across to make it an even comparison and not tip the person off of what you're getting at. And again, it was the same type of thing where it's like, oh, okay, it has to kind of fit in here and here. It's kind of really competing with the Stormclad. I think this is going to be somewhere around that 18 points, which is exactly what a Scythian is. So again, I don't want to be saying like, haha, this proves everything, because it's a small sample size. Some people right away kind of figured out what I was going with this, but still, as a little sampling and something that kind of like nudges the right way, it seems that these things are generally in the right points. The only thing is that these basic jacks probably should be like a point more expensive, which is what we're kind of seeing in the errata anyway. They started boosting up some of these points, and it's going to kind of even out. But it's not like there's a huge disparity, right? Like the Scythian should actually just be 14 points, and you know, the Ironclad should be 15. No, there's nothing crazy like that. It's very clear that the Ironclad and something like the Juggernaut and something like the Crusader are very basic jacks that are actually pretty bad. You know, when you look at the Crusader, it's like speed 4. Oh boy, he has one weapon and he can only have Fury 3, and it's only 1-inch melee. You know, all the horse people are looking like that's awful. It's so short threat. Why would I want that? And so when you start making that comparison, they start seeing the other side. But I think another part that kind of throws this off is the areas like the Karchev list, right? Where you have the Karchev and it has all the jacks. And because we already said that on the Horde side, they won the heavy race, right? They're awesome at the heavies. So why is it this War Machine side with these Khador heavies are now winning? And I don't think that really comes down to the jacks versus the beasts. This is a mistake on PP's part, which they already started fixing in the errata, where, okay, this is just they're cheap right now, and Karchev does way too much for them, and so that's a whole separate thing that I think is just souring it for everyone. So what I'm really getting at for this again is that both sides really kind of like hate the other, where the War Machine thinks the beasts are too good and the Horde players are thinking that the jacks are too cheap and too efficient. But it's the way that they are right now, and the models they have are just because of the way that they came from Mark II. When you go and you escalate it up to that side, we're saying like 6 heavies or multiple heavies, doesn't have to be 6, could be 5, could be 4. You really see that the Horde side really does support that a lot better, and that the Horde beasts, even at their point costs, are going to be just dominating against those heavy Warjacks. However, once you switch that and go to lights, that's where the War Machine side comes forward and does great things. So there you go, guys. Just want to kind of like share that, and just the idea that, hey, if we kind of see it from the other person's side, you realize there is actually kind of a balance there that PP is going at, you know, compared to Mark II, where in Mark II it was just out to lunch. It was just, you know, maybe not out to lunch is the wrong word, but it was just so obvious that the beasts were just better in every regard, and now they just took this and they brought it to that. And I think it's great. I think the spot we're at is great. And now we just have to keep that in mind whenever we're talking about other things like the broken Hellmouth. But that could be a topic for another day. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Merry Christmas. If you have any thoughts on this, please post it down below. And otherwise, we'll catch you later. Bye.